Hello, hello! Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. I am your librarian, Katrina, and if you are new here, welcome. On Sundays, I do this thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. It is the last Sunday of the month, so I am looking at religious stuff, making this week's book, Gods, Goddesses, and Myths of Creation by Mircea Eliade. I don't know if you can hear the horrific scratching in the background. It's not a wild animal trying to break in, it's the tree scratching the window outside. Anyways, since I am still TDY, obviously, given my background, and I really don't want to buy a lot of cocktail stuff this week, I picked up a KBS Iced Latte for the cocktail instead. I'm just going to open this up and drink it. Additionally, this really isn't going to take very long. The book itself is only 150 pages, so it's a fairly short review. So let's do this. This book was not quite what I was expecting, I'm not quite sure what I was expecting. I think I was expecting more discourse on how various myths came to be, how they related to each other, like parallels between the Greek and the Roman gods and goddesses, which are more or less fairly well known here in the West, but maybe not so broadly known elsewhere. How every group has flood myths. While there was some discussion of the flood myths, that was more incidental to other things. This didn't really have a whole lot of any of that in this book. So what was this book? It was a collection of excerpts from world myths. And that's it. It literally is just excerpts from other works describing various gods, goddesses, and creation myths, just exactly like the title says. Which was interesting in and of itself, but is necessarily limited in 150 pages. I mean, it's a big damn planet. A lot of cultures out there, and they each have their own unique myths. So this was by no means comprehensive. This is not a complete list of all the myths and everything that you would expect to find in an inclusive, like all-inclusive, work. Let me try this. It's not too bad. It's sweet. I'm not surprised by that. It's not bad. He would include myths from very specific Native American tribes, but by no means all tribes. No idea why he left some out. He included snippets from Greek myth, large excerpts from the Poetic Edda, but not necessarily the same passages I might have chosen to show parallels in belief. Parallels, not direct similarities, which is fine. I mean, the reason it's parallel beliefs is because each culture found their own voice in creation and belief independent of each other, basically. I mean, sometimes concurrent, but still independent of each other. There are excerpts in here from Africa and Egypt, and yes, I am well aware that Egypt is in Africa, but because of proximity to Greece and Rome and the fact that Egypt, through the Greek Ptolemies, was strongly parallel to Greek myth and culture, Egyptian myth is accounted differently from that of the African high gods, as this section of the book is called. He also includes myths from Mesopotamia and Samaria, which also had contact with ancient Egyptian culture. Provably, we know that. Historically, we know that to be true. The North American Indians, this book was initially published in 1967, so Indian is the terminology of the day at the time of publication. They're accounted for under both the Divinities of Primitives, not my words, Divinities of Primitives, section, and the Myths of Creation and Myths of Destruction. I think primitive, again, is very much I don't know. Book was published in 67, take it for what it is, man. But again, only certain tribes were included. A simple Google search shows that there are 575 federally recognized tribes in the United States. I believe Eliade provides myths from 10 of them. And that's including Polynesian tribes, Aztec, Mayan, and Incan. So, yeah. He was very, very selective in what he chose. But he included myths from India, Persia, Egypt, Africa, North and South America, Japan, and Greece. None from China, which I thought fascinating, and none from Russia, which was also fascinating because those are two incredibly large demographics, and the only reason I can think of for their exclusion is lack of availability for resources. And the book was published, again, 67, height of the Cold War, right? They didn't have a whole lot of reach into what the folklore and myth of Russia and China would have been at the time when both of those countries were incredibly communistic. And we weren't really on speaking terms with either of them at that point in history. Again, all abbreviated excerpts. They were there, but they were from well-known texts like the Prose Edda, Homer, the Rig Veda, the Upanishads, the Quran, Zoroastrianism. Specific Zarathustra text that he referenced was the Gatha Yasna. I think I have the Avestra. I've never heard of the Gatha Yasna. Not going to hurt to look that up, and see what else I can learn. And all of the excerpts were interesting in and of themselves, but frustrating because they're clearly taken out of context of a larger text. So you're not quite getting the whole story of what is there. Just what the author chose to include in his conglomeration. But it did, however, highlight the importance of reading multiple translations when what you're reading is not the original language of authorship. Because he included a rather large excerpts from Gilgamesh that was way more detailed and considerably longer than the section on the flood that I read in the copy of Gilgamesh that I read back in November. And I reminded me, like, I read it and I was like, I really don't recall reading this much about the flood in that copy, in my version of the Gilgamesh that I read. And I was cautioned on that. Somebody commented on my Gilgamesh video here, I'll throw that up, at some interesting commented that the George edition is better. And I immediately put that on my wish list, and I feel like I definitely need to read it to get the full story of Gilgamesh, or to get more information on Gilgamesh. It's the world's oldest known myth, right? And it predates basically everything we have. The real value in this book, though, is in the very detailed footnotes for each excerpt and the citation saying which source was quoted from, because this gives you a jumping off point for further research into any one of these myths. And again, not by any metric all-inclusive. Large swaths of the population are not accounted for here. Reference again China, Russia, and a huge chunk of the Native American tribes were left out of it. Again, no idea why he chose the ones he did. But again, jumping off point for further research, and hopefully that research can take you down rabbit holes into other research. I will say that my favorite myth from what I read in this book was God and the Five Women, which is a myth of the origin of earth, fire, water, and woman from the Thompson Indians of the North Pacific coast. So this one was condensed and paraphrased from James A. Teat, Mythology of the Thompson Indians from 1912. So this was written well over 100 years ago, so I feel fairly confident in paraphrasing this here. Not getting copyright stricken, though I don't know if the 67 version is out of copyright or not. So I'm going to paraphrase it myself. All right. The Old One, aka Chief, comes down from the upper world on a cloud to the surface of the Great Lake, which was all that existed at the time. And the Old One pulls 5 hairs from his head and throws them on the water, and they become 5 perfectly formed, beautiful young women. And he asks each of them in turn, what do you want to be? And the first one says, I will be a woman to bear children. I shall be bad and foolish and seek after my own pleasure. My descendants will fight, steal, kill, and commit adultery. Right. Just an aside, to me that's an odd choice, but that's what she went with. And the chief responds that he is sorry for her choice, because her choice meant death and trouble would come to the world. But he granted her her desire. This is what she wanted to be, and so this is what he made her. The second one says, I will be a woman to bear children. I shall be good and virtuous. My descendants will be wise, peaceful, honest, truthful, and chaste. And the chief commends her and tells her that her way would triumph in the end. It'll be darkness at first. It's sure going to look like the sloth and indolence is winning, but in the end, her way is going to win. And then it gets really interesting, because the third chooses to become earth. So from her, the Old One says, everything will grow, and to her it will return in death. She's going to be the alpha and the omega of all life, basically. The fourth chooses to become fire in grass, trees, and all wood for the good of man. I'm going to circle back to that one in just a minute. The fifth chooses to become water to cleanse and make wise the people. I will assist all things on earth to maintain life. And so the chief takes all of this in, and he transforms each of them as they requested. First he transforms earth, then water, then fire. Then he placed the 2 who chose to remain women, good and bad, on earth, and impregnated them, telling them they would be the parents of all the people. The evil would be more numerous at first, but the good would prevail in the end, eventually, he promised. Then the end will come. All the dead and living gathered together, earth, fire, and water will resume their original forms, and all will be transformed and made new. So we have, again, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the ending of these peoples, right? And that's the legend. So what was my takeaway from this? Why was this my favorite? Well, first off, choice. All right, their great chief didn't just say, this is how it's going to be. He gave them a choice, each of them. And each of them chose what they wanted. What do you want to be? Make your choice. One chooses darkness, one chooses light. The others choose service, literally. Earth chooses to be the mother of all, choosing to feed the masses. Fire is rightly feared. It's a very fierce element, but it's also brutally necessary because it is needed in the cold of winter. It's also a necessary precursor to new life, and there are a lot of plants that only bloom in the ashes of a fire, right? Something that was recognized in Greek myth with the phoenix, right? The concept of the bird that explodes into flame and then rises anew from the ashes. So this is something that is known, has been known for millennia, that some things only bloom in fire. Water, of course, is needed for all life. All right, nothing's going to grow without water, even from the fires. So earth, fire, and water are in balance. Good and evil start off in balance. The old one tells them as much. So that's what we learn. Second, we learn, well, I mean, we're kind of there, aren't we? Look at any social media outlet, all right? You'll see evil seems to be in the lead, with people, both men and women, choosing indolence and vice, choosing to fight, steal, kill, and commit adultery. But, well, in the old one promises that in the end, good will win. Virtue wins out. Wisdom, peace, honesty, truthfulness, chastity win. Now, chastity is one of those weird words that has almost a dual meaning, all right? I don't believe it just means virginity. It means refraining from sexual activity that is immoral. And yes, sometimes that means abstaining absolutely and just not having sex. But you can't have the next generation without sex. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It probably means relations in the confines of a relationship, all right? A good relationship, something where you are balanced with your partner. You'll do notice that he gave these options to the women. Wonder what that says. I don't know enough about Thompson Indian culture to say, but I would hazard a guess that women were considered wise, mostly. And there's always that one that chose evil, right? Well, the point of all this is that in the end, good wins. Truth, honesty, integrity, ultimately these things win. And again, it's truth, not your truth, the truth. Honesty, tell the truth. Speak truthfully. Have integrity. Do what is right even when no one is looking. That is what integrity is. Doing the right thing. Not for you, but in general, the right thing. They're not always mutually exclusive, but sometimes the right thing for you is not going to be the right thing for humanity. But anyways, I'm a sucker for a happy ending, so I think that's why I liked it. I like that promise that in the end, good will win. Made me happy. So this is not a very long review, and I just knew it wasn't going to take long. It was like only 150 pages. If it had been one continuous story, it might have taken a little longer, but jumping the way it did, it just wasn't going to take long. But while this book wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, I recognized the value of the resource as a jumping off point for further research. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be back at my regular home base next week, so I'll have a full cocktail, not just a beer. And I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye.